Inside a demon realm, just beyond the gate, something curious caught the eye. A bird-shaped leg stood awkwardly beside two tiny herbs, while the creature's head, yellow and reptile-like, remained locked on a small plant pushing bravely through the dry, arid soil. Suddenly the ground erupted as the roots of the little sprout burst upward, and to the snake-bird's surprise, three plump, white, living mandragora roots sprang forth, standing tall and defiant. The two sides glared at one another, tension crackling in the air, until the snake-bird finally lunged. From a human perspective, the confrontation looked almost comical. One observer, a girl wearing a buffalo skull atop her head, tilted her head and wondered aloud who would win today. The mandragoras retaliated cleverly. The snake-bird dodged one punch, only to have a leafy appendage brush across its face. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, overwhelmed, the animal's eyes filled with tears, and it bolted in a fit of sobs. The mandragoras celebrated their victory, and the girl praised Sasa with a wide smile. Later, a young man approached the victorious mandragora, chatting about the day's big match. The plant, however, protested, insisting that he first open the container he was holding. With a smile, the young man complied, revealing a jar filled with moisturizing cream. He gently rubbed it onto the mandragora's face, leaving the little plant refreshed, content, and practically glowing with happiness. Meanwhile, a girl nearby called out, complaining that she was starving. She shouted to her uncle, asking how much longer the food would take. He reassured her with a grin that the meal was almost ready. Moments later, he energetically stirred a bubbling dish over the fire. The girl clutched a basket of eggs, insisting they not be forgotten, so the cook cracked them into the pan while she cheered him on, lavishing him with praise for his culinary skills. Finally, the dish was presented. The girl, examining it with delight, realized one last touch was missing. Together, she and her uncle sprinkled sesame seeds on top. Once the finishing touch was applied, they called everyone in the forest to the table. The young man and his mandragora arrived, followed by the hawk-faced man and the girl in the skull mask. Soon, everyone was enjoying a heaping serving of special kimchi fried rice. The girl turned to her uncle, beaming with gratitude before taking a bite. The explosion of flavor nearly knocked her off her feet, and she shouted, barely able to contain herself, that this was, without question, the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. The skull-masked girl added her own enthusiastic praise, causing the cook to blush furiously. The young man dove in as well, only to notice that the mandragora had fallen asleep peacefully in his hand. Seconds were demanded by all, children, humans, and plants alike, leaving the cook in a state of pure bliss. The young man leaned back, smiling contentedly, taking a deep breath, and thought to himself that, when it came down to it, life in the demon realm might not be so bad after all. Story actually started a long time ago, where a gate opened unexpectedly, unleashing devastation from a world known as the demon realm. Ferocious monsters poured forth without restraint, spreading terror and catastrophe across the land. In response, a small number of humans awakened as hunters, gaining mana and unique abilities. Thanks to their intervention, humanity finally managed to mount a counterattack. Over time, cities were rebuilt. Normal life returned in pockets, though many problems persisted. The emergence of ever more dangerous monsters, coupled with the constant threat of new incursions, revealed a harsh truth. The naturally awakened hunters were far too few to provide adequate defense. Humanity turned to innovation and desperation. Scientists created artificial life forms known as chimera hunters, engineered to obliterate monsters with a single strike. Their construction relied on corpses of death row inmates, animals, minerals, excavated from within the gates, and monster cells. These shadowy laboratories became the stage for humanity's survival, allowing the mass production of chimera hunters. This breakthrough drastically reduced hunter casualties and saved countless lives, hailed as a triumph of science and ingenuity. Decades later, deep in the dead of night inside an illegal chimera research lab, A doctor remarked to his coworker that they could finally check the last subject and go home. Inside a high-grade storage unit, they examined subject number 17, noticing that his arm was slightly rotten. One man approached the cell, ignoring his colleague's warnings, assuming the subject's mind was so broken that he would not respond without explicit orders. They surveyed the grotesque collection of monstrous and animal parts surrounding him, remarking that the right arm was completely ruined, likely a side effect of the experiment. The other man scolded his colleague for being scared of someone who could barely see. They decided to overlook the issue, assuming number 17 would soon be discarded. Later, in the lab director's office, they reported that number 17 was nearly useless and close to dying. The director requested an estimate of his remaining time. The doctors predicted he had at most a month left. Despite his condition, the director ordered that number 17 be deployed for the upcoming gate blockade operation. He would not fight on the front lines, but serve as rear guard, covering the hunter's retreat. Crucially, no return command was issued, allowing the Chimera Hunter one final hunt. In the Demon Realm's rugged mountains, flying monsters swooped for a feast. The Chimera Hunter revealed sharp, magical claws that unleashed strands of golden energy, slicing the monsters into pieces. A massive, five-sided beast erupted from underground, jaws gaping wide. Using the multiple eyes embedded in his hands and legs, the Chimera Hunter leapt above the creature and landed 2 precise strikes, carving it apart as easily as fruit. He then opened his own head like a flower in bloom, and produced a crescent moon-shaped globe, channeling a surge of energy that obliterated the flying monsters and the enormous ground beast. The hunters could only stare in awe at the scale of destruction. One hunter commented that the gate showed no sign of closing. His companion reassured him that as long as they had the S-class Chimera Hunter, they could hold out indefinitely. Drawing his sword, he dispatched a gigantic insect, noting that only the stragglers remained. Suddenly, the dark portal emitted a strange sound, followed by an announcement confirming the gate's disappearance signal. The team began their retreat, but the Chimera Hunter remained engaged, pummeling a monstrous foe. One hunter questioned whether they should bring him along, only to be told to leave him behind. During the battle, one of the monster's attacks blinded another eye on the Chimera Hunter's hand. The hunters felt guilt, but remembered that his lifespan was nearly up. With his remaining third eye, he glared at them, clenched his fist, and despite severe injuries, swiftly dispatched the monster. When new monsters attacked like serpents, the Chimera Hunter formed another moon-shaped globe and slammed it into the ground, releasing a massive burst of energy. Yearning for a return command that never came, the venom spread across his face and shoulders, sealing his fate. That day, Chimera Hunter number 17's final mission yielded phenomenal results. Among a field of monster corpses, not a single hunter had died, and approximately 2 monsters had been subdued. In his final moments, memories of his unrecorded past flickered in his mind. He realized he had once been fully human, kidnapped at the age of 9. Fragments of his life flashed before him. 79 years ago, a man cradled a baby in District 13 orphanage. 70 years ago, the same man scolded the now 9-year-old boy for hitting friends with stones. During a harsh winter, the orphanage expelled him, forcing him to wander the cold until 2 shady men found him and whisked him away. The boy woke restrained on a laboratory bed, assigned to the designation number 17. The adults around him injected an upper S-class worm larva, watching his body begin its transformation. When he developed a special ability without side effects, they implanted more enhancements, seeking reactions as if cruelty itself guided their hands. 64 years ago, he defended a building from swarms of wasp-shaped monsters, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. 59 years ago, he appeared in yet another ruined building, confused, while a doctor fretted over potential memory issues. 54 years ago, after over 500 monster cell implants in 15 years, his hunter rank skyrocketed. He had become the lab's greatest success. 20 years ago, a hunter dangled meat before him, treating the now beaked chimera like a pet, proving he would consume anything regardless of its origin. That was the last thing he could remember before actually dying there, but the surprise came years after that when a thick trail of his power etched the ground, and a single bone of his own rose, magically attracting more bones to assemble a human body. With 527 types of monster cells implanted, Chimera Hunter number 17 regained his muscles. A burst of light confirmed it. A human was reborn. He gazed in disbelief at his reflection, uncertain if he was truly human, but undeniably alive beneath the glow of a breathtaking sunset. Examining his body, Cheon Do-woon discovered that he could still summon sharp claws from his hands. The monster cell's abilities remained intact, and he realized that he could not claim to be entirely human. He assumed the lab had considered him discarded, as no one had come to retrieve him, and the experiment number on his wrist had vanished. He suspected that the transformation of his body must be the result of an immortal-type ability, perhaps one that allowed him to revive up to 3 times as long as his core remained intact. He had always heard that human and immortal cells could not fuse, which only added to the mystery. What was certain was that his body had recovered to peak condition, and with the experimental side effects dissipated, he felt free from the perpetual brain fog that had plagued him for decades, along with the spells that had been engraved to prevent escape or rebellion. If his days as the cursed number 17 were truly over, perhaps he could finally live as a human. He tried to recall the day he received his name. Despite his rough nature, he had always tried to help others, and the old man had recognized his spirit of tenacity, naming him Cheon Do-woon. Yet present-day Cheon laughed at the notion that a slum orphan could truly help others. He wondered what he should do next. Revenge seemed distant, the fire of vengeance no longer burning as brightly as it once had. There was no way to return to the human world for now, but perhaps someday he would encounter his enemies. He would worry about that when the time came. For now, looking down at his naked body, Cheon decided to try living a little more like a human. He set out in search of clothing, wandering through the vast desert and pondering when he had last worn any. Eventually, in a vibrant riverside forest, he examined a creature that seemed suitable for his purpose. It was a bird-shaped mule whose body had succumbed to poison. Rejoicing at his luck, he extended his arm, which transformed into a sharp blade. Although he could not recall the optimal technique for extracting leather, he began cutting open the creature. A cloud of purple poison erupted, but it caused him no harm, though it required a thorough washing afterward. After successfully removing the hide, Cheon waded into the river to clean it, finding it surprisingly stiff. On a whim, he began punching the leather, reasoning that this must be how one tanned and processed it. At last, he admired the supple result and prepared to fashion it into clothing. Standing before the creature's body, he attempted to put on his new suit, only to notice its eyes seemed to flare with fire, as if it had revived and stared resentfully at the man who had been playing with its skin. Nevertheless, Cheon forced himself into the barely adequate leather suit, but quickly realized that the poison had not fully drained. The poor animal made agonized noises, and Cheon questioned whether it was still alive and trying to communicate. He reflected that its apparent immortality mirrored his own. In the past, he might have killed such a threat without hesitation, but now he saw no need to harm the weakened creature. Deciding that both he and the animal deserved a second chance, he left the suffering bird behind, reasoning that fate might allow them to meet again. After some time, Cheon arrived at a cave, considering it as a potential home. But when a monster with hundreds of legs appeared and attacked, Cheon swiftly decapitated it and decided this place was unsuitable, moving on. Later, in a snowy expanse, he rejected a cave where a yeti's terrified expression was frozen on its face, lying dead beside its slaughtered kin. This, too, was unfit for a home. He passed through a foul-smelling jungle, a cave that was far too humid, and even a volcano that was unbearably hot. At last, he stood atop a cliff, admiring the demon realm's breathtaking scenery. Taking a leap off a waterfall, he landed safely below, marveling at the crystal-clear water and the abundance of unfriendly fish that could make a hearty lunch. He contemplated that, with a natural fish farm, a wealth of flowers, and clean air, this place could be ideal for building a home. Standing among the trees, Cheon smiled with satisfaction, certain that he had finally found his new home. Yet, just a short distance away, rays of shimmering energy began to converge. A blue portal opened, and something crashed to the ground. Its head appeared ablaze, and its metallic form unmistakably marked it as a robot. Upon arrival, it wondered aloud if it had finally reached the demon realm. Meanwhile, Cheon Do-woon stood in his chosen spot. He flexed his fingers, from which golden strings shimmered in the sunlight. With a deft motion, he manipulated the magical strings to fell the trees occupying his selected plot, quickly clearing enough space for construction. Next, Cheon used the golden strings to lift heavy logs into the air, directing them with precision as if conducting an orchestra. He stacked them neatly in the background and, with a swift gesture, plowed the earth to create a perfectly flat surface for the house's foundation. Picking up a hefty trunk with surprising ease, he marveled at how spontaneous his actions felt. He began planting pillars at each corner, briefly wondering whether following one's instincts truly qualified as free will. After laying down some planks for the floor, he realized the need to stabilize the walls. Lacking nails, he recalled that snail-type monster mucus could serve as an adhesive. Layer by layer, he stacked the logs, spreading the viscous green liquid between them. He was confident that once hardened, it would become as solid as stone. For the finishing touch, he spun a protective web of golden strings around his new home, convinced that most monsters would not dare approach a barrier crafted from silkworm larva silk. Stepping back to admire his handiwork, he saw a peculiar but sturdy house wrapped in golden silk and felt genuine satisfaction. Yet, something still felt incomplete. Cheon remembered that years ago, while attending a lab conference about buildings, it was customary to grow something in the yard. Realizing he could hardly raise dogs in the demon realm, he knelt and decided to try his hand at gardening. He imagined that planting mandragora there might be an option. Later that day, Cheon trekked up the frigid mountain, entirely unaffected by the cold. He knew that mandragora thrived in mana-rich peaks. The falling snow reminded him of the day he had first been kidnapped to the lab, a day so cold that, ironically, he had almost welcomed the abduction. There were advantages to becoming a chimera. He no longer feared freezing or starving to death. Guided by the thick mana in the air, Cheon finally spotted the distinctive leaves of the mandragora poking through the snow. Mandragoras were delicate, sunfish-like monsters, notoriously sensitive to stress and prone to dying from minor environmental shifts. Sitting down, Cheon carefully selected a young and presumably adaptable specimen. As he pulled up the baby mandragora, he braced for the infamous scream, but was greeted by a soft, endearing noise. Gently petting the tiny plant with one finger, Cheon was amused to find it merely cooed in response, as did the next one he tried. He began to suspect that the legendary scream only occurred when humans forced them out of the earth in low-mana worlds. Here, in the demon realm, they seemed calm, and perhaps even recognized him as kin. After all, he too had mandragora cells implanted in his body. Tucking the sleepy plants into his kamarband, he mused that once they matured he might ask for a few root tendrils to brew a potent tea, though he recalled that forcibly picking their fruit would make it dangerously poisonous. As he glanced back toward the snowy mountain, Cheon considered the possibility of encountering hunters. He debated whether he should collect a gatestone quickly. Not far away, two distressed hunters, Seongju and Taehoon, stood wounded in the snow, bracing themselves against a pack of white monsters. Their gaping jaws were barely held at bay by a failing magical barrier. Anxiety overtook them, and one of the hunters questioned his decision to volunteer for the chimera hunt, knowing the shield would soon collapse. When the barrier shattered, the hunter screamed for help. From the sky, a figure landed with force, sending the monsters into a frenzy. Cheon, his face set with resolve, took a step forward, and the terrified beasts trampled over one another in a desperate bid to escape. The astonished hunters thanked Cheon for the timely rescue, quickly introducing themselves and asking his name, which he provided. Tae-hoon doubted Cheon was even a hunter, prompting him to ask why his companion, a clear D-class, was present in the first place. Seong-ju explained that the lucrative bounty for capturing a live chimera was too tempting to pass up, especially since rumors claimed that one of the test subjects had escaped from the lab, supposedly a machine creature that had fled through a gate. Cheon, relieved to learn they weren't after him, listened as the hunters lamented being robbed by their own team, who had stolen both their supplies and the precious gate stone. Realizing the crucial item was in the hands of the traitorous team, the hunters pleaded with Cheon for a plan, fully aware that lingering in the demon realm much longer would be fatal. Mana contamination affected survival time, depending on a hunter's awakening grade. If they did not return soon to purify their mana, death was almost certain. Moved by their desperation, Cheon resolved to retrieve the gatestone. In front of their astonished eyes, he launched himself skyward, leaving them behind as they continued to beg. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the snow, the machine chimera prowled near the edge of a cliff, aware of the danger of its location. Suddenly, a group of treacherous hunters ambushed it. The robot's demeanor shifted instantly, turning furious and darker, intent on eliminating the attackers as they converged from every direction. Soon after, Cheon arrived at the chaotic scene, wondering if he had come a moment too late. It appeared that all the injured hunters had fled, abandoning even their luggage. He noticed both childlike and animal footprints in the snow, and speculated that the mechanical creature must have fought while shifting forms. He recalled that it was said to be made of liquid metal and capable of transforming freely, although the rare material likely limited its size, possibly to that of a child or a large dog. He was impressed that such a small construct could fend off 5 B-rank hunters on its own. Meanwhile, Seong-ju lay on the ground, feeling doomed, while Tae-hoon urged him to hang on. As Seong-ju coughed up blood, they prayed for a miracle. That miracle arrived in the form of Cheon, who appeared magnificently with their stolen luggage slung over his back. Tae-hoon rushed to him, dropping to his knees and begging for salvation, even offering 2 checks, the sum of their life's worth, in exchange for a single gate stone. Cheon, realizing that the 20 million won would be useful when he returned to the human world, produced a blue gate stone and shattered it, opening a portal. Tae-hoon's gratitude overflowed. Cheon, eyeing the money, asked about the going rate for a gate stone in the human realm. Tae-hoon revealed it was only 1,000,000 won. Cheon, feeling he had been overpaid, placed his hand on the injured hunter's shoulder and sent healing blue light into his body, treating the excess as change. Tae-hoon, astounded, realized Cheon was injecting mana, a perilous act even for A-rank hunters, since mismatched mana cores could result in death for both parties. Seong-ju soon realized that his demonic energy had been purified and embraced his friend in disbelief. Profusely thanking Cheon, the hunters marveled at his mysterious abilities. Later, Cheon returned home and was relieved to find no intruders. The mandragora seedlings woke with faint noises, prompting him to plant them immediately in a small plot beside his house. Their half-buried roots looked dissatisfied, so Cheon surmised they might be hungry, and enveloped them in his mana until they perked up. Cheon sensed a presence concealed in the bushes, but chose to ignore it for now. He stashed his money inside a wall and went inside to sort through his new belongings. His haul included a portable burner, a cooking pot set, 8 gate stones, spare clothes, and 2 sleeping bags. Holding up a pack of ramen, he nostalgically recalled his childhood and decided to try cooking it once again. Following the recipe, he fetched water from the river, but 2 carnivorous fish leaped out to attack him. Unfazed, he flicked them aside and figured they could serve as extra protein. He foraged for eggs and edible greens, then added everything to a big stew pan before heading home. Meanwhile, the hungry mechanical chimera, drawn by the aroma, watched as Cheon fired up the burner. Lacking any culinary guidance, Cheon tossed everything together without hesitation. The stench quickly reached the mandragoras, who recoiled in disgust, yet the same scent wafted through the trees to the robot's sensors. Surprisingly, the robot liked it. Eager for a meal, it transformed into a dog, reasoning that humans were more likely to help a pitiable canine. Approaching Cheon, the dog feigned injury for sympathy, but Cheon saw through the ruse. He concluded that this was a young, inexperienced being whose escape from the lab was all the more impressive. Inviting the dog to eat, Cheon and his mechanical companion eyed the suspiciously toxic-looking meal with hunger. While the dog enjoyed the food, Cheon was reminded of the same taste from his days in the orphanage. Certainly not delicious, but oddly nostalgic. The memory seemed to erase any concern for the smell, though the mandragoras gagged nearby. After eating, Cheon told the dog it was free to go. He noticed, however, that it was limping on the wrong leg. When he pointed this out, the naive creature switched legs, making Cheon smile as it trotted away. Later, beside the waterfall, Cheon sat and began washing the clothes he had found, determined not to remain in leather forever. He tried to wash them gently, but his attempt went awry when his stick hit the water with too much force, shattering both the clothes and the rock beneath. He sighed and consoled himself. Realizing at least one shirt had survived, his thoughts drifted to the mechanical creature, which had transformed into a nearby rock. Its ever-changing forms puzzled him, as it would appear differently whether eating ramen, doing chores, or admiring flowers like forsythia, yet it never seemed to do anything meaningful. Once, when it disguised itself as a tree, and a bee landed on it, the creature reverted to its robotic form and fled, loudly declaring its hatred for bees. Cheon deduced that its mental age was likely under 5, and that its robotic, halting speech reflected artificially injected knowledge, a common trait for young chimeras. He mimicked the robotic voice, complimenting the beauty of the forsythia flowers, nearly revealing that he had discovered the creature. Returning to his laundry, Cheon tackled the last soaking shirt. Washing proved far more difficult than he had imagined, but he managed to save it. He hung it on a golden string stretched between 2 trees, before heading off to check on the mandragoras. At that moment, the chimera, still disguised as a rock, leapt up and snatched the shirt, proudly wearing it as if it were a prized possession. The chimera then shifted into a human-like form, complete with flowing hair and hands, looking quite pleased with its transformation. Meanwhile, the mandragoras appeared unhappy, their leaves drooping and roots drying. Cheon poked at the soil, uncovering various strange insects, which he promptly eliminated. He decided it was time to create a proper vegetable garden, aiming to make a patch as large as his house. Just then, the mechanical creature appeared in the form of a little girl, cheerfully greeting Cheon. Surprised by her sudden appearance, he immediately recognized her. When she asked if the house belonged to him, Cheon replied with a playful yes. She asked if he was a native, and he played along, inquiring about her supposed tribe. Flustered, she stammered before claiming she came from a place across the waterfall. Cheon pretended to believe her and suggested she must be from the coconut tribe. She enthusiastically affirmed this idea. Cheon noticed that her outfit resembled his own, but the girl insisted that in her tribe, anyone who found an item owned it. Amused, Cheon told her to keep it, leaving her momentarily stunned. Curious, he asked why the coconut tribe had sent her here. She dramatically claimed she had been exiled and pleaded to stay, explaining that here there were no bugs and a house to shelter her. Cheon realized she simply needed a safe place to rest and agreed, on the condition that she contribute to household chores. Overjoyed, she eagerly accepted. When Cheon showed her the area he planned for a vegetable patch, she volunteered to help till the earth, boasting of her strength. As she worked with surprising speed, Cheon wondered why she showed no inclination to hide her true nature. He concluded that her upbringing in the lab had left her clueless about ordinary children. When Cheon introduced himself and asked her name, she hesitated. Eventually, recalling the beautiful flowers they had admired, she declared herself Kimnari. Cheon clarified if she meant forsythia, but she insisted on the Korean version. Soon, the vegetable patch was ready, surrounded by a stone fence, and the mandragoras appeared content within their new home. Chion, ever the perfectionist, mentioned that it could use some tilling, but the girl offered no reply. Suddenly she began to sob, leaving Chion baffled. She revealed that seeing the mandragoras reminded her of her friends, a confession that shocked him, as he doubted anyone in the lab could have had friends. At that moment a wild animal sound echoed through the air, frightening the girl, who dropped to the ground in terror. Chion reassured her, explaining that it was merely the noise of monsters hunting each other. She told him that before arriving here, she had seen a chick-like monster being attacked by several creatures, and it had been suffering from bites. Chion, pragmatic as ever, commented that it would likely be eaten soon. The distressed girl pleaded with him to save it, admitting that she herself could not help monsters, likely due to brainwashing side effects. Sitting beside her supportively, he explained that if she truly wanted to help, she could make a difference, and suggested they go investigate. The girl, energized by his encouragement, soared off in a single leap, promising to return. As the large insect-like monsters closed in on the helpless white chick, the Chimera girl arrived in a blur, dispatching the attackers with clinical precision. Fueled by memories of her time in the lab, where she had clung to a yellow pony chick, while researchers fretted that her high battle rankings would disrupt their experiments, and where other children tore apart her stuffed animals and bullied her, she fought fiercely, cutting down the cruel monsters with swift and powerful blows. Back at the garden, Chion nurtured the mandragoras with mana as Nari returned, tears streaming down her face. She confessed that she did not know what to do, as the little chick she held would not regain consciousness. Chion tried to comfort her, but he could not help noticing that the white chick bore a striking resemblance to the very bird whose leather he had previously used, a realization that could make things awkward indeed. Deciding to take a closer look, Chion filled his hand with mana and gently placed it on the chick's head. He felt relieved to discover that the wound wasn't fatal. Every monster's magic, he knew, carried traces of its unique history. This little creature had shrunk and lost some of its color, but it was unmistakably the same immortal-type monster he had encountered before. Chion guessed that its reduced size might be linked to its unusual regeneration process. Nari, watching anxiously, asked if he thought the chick was dying. Chion reassured her that it was just malnourished, having grown smaller from lack of food, and explained that after receiving some of his mana, it would likely recover on its own if left undisturbed. Nari, recalling the loss of her last pony pet, was unsatisfied with this answer. Calling him uncle for the first time, she insisted that leaving it alone would surely lead to its death, pointing out how it lay flopped over like a rice cake. With a pleading, wide-eyed expression, she asked if she could raise it herself. Cheon, gentle but cautious, warned her that the bird could grow quite large. She promised to feed it only a little, and finally he relented. When the bird awoke, it blinked around in confusion, saw Chion, and instantly recognized him as the one who had taken its skin before. Its anxious cooing sounded like a normal bird's cry to anyone else. Without warning, Nari scooped it up with a delighted smile and pressed it tightly to her chest, announcing that it was awake. The bird made more noise, clearly unhappy with its predicament, shouting for her to let it go. To Chion's astonishment, he realized he could actually understand the bird's words. Later, Nari declared that the treatment was complete, having bandaged the chick, and excitedly announced that she had named him Ku. Cheon, carrying a load of logs on his shoulder, accepted the decision, though the bird protested being named without its input. Nari, noticing his persistent cooing, guessed he was thirsty, and poured an entire pot of water over him, nearly drowning him. Chion intervened, explaining that the bird had had enough. Nari, undeterred, scampered off in search of food for her new pet. Turning back to the logs, Chion arranged them in an H shape, planning to build a storage cabinet. He shifted his hand into a blade to cut the wood, but the logs splintered instead of slicing cleanly. Confused, he recalled successfully performing the same task when building his chair and table. The bird explained that this wood was a softer type and different in color, and Cheon wondered aloud if strength really varied by color, making the bird confirm that the red logs were the strongest. The point was, the bird wasn't talking to the boy, but reviewing the answer with itself. Just then, to the bird's surprise, it suddenly realized that the guy actually could understand its words as a seemingly human. The bird, standing tall, tried to read Cheon's mind, but he casually blocked it. Certain now, the bird asked outright if Cheon could hear him, and Cheon explained that it wasn't exactly hearing, but that the words simply popped into his mind. More surprisingly, Cheon noted that it was stranger for a monster to understand human speech. Cheon concluded that this chick must be one of those rare, intelligent monsters born against all odds. He reminded the bird that they had met before. The creature, in a dry tone, commented that it had hardly waited to see him again. Cheon pressed for the reason, but the bird dismissed it, softening its tone and expressing a desire to help him now, since the chimera had saved it with his treatment. Seizing the opportunity, Cheon asked for the bird's help immediately. After a brief pause, the bird agreed, enthusiastically tearing off its bandages and inviting Cheon to follow it to the grove of red trees. Meanwhile, Nari found herself fleeing from a raging fire, cursing the lab as she tripped and fell, terrified that the researchers had come to recapture her. Her pursuer tracked her via GPS, aware that the mechanical creature could change shape. Despite his unease at attacking a child, he conjured flames in his hands and hurled them at the sobbing, paralyzed Nari. At that critical moment, Cheon arrived with Ku perched on his shoulder. The bird assured him that directions to the red trees could wait because saving the child was now the priority. Cheon observed Nari's shattered composure and intense fear of fire and resolved to extinguish the blaze first. The arsonist, unaware of Cheon's true power, shouted at him to leave while he still could. Cheon, unmoved, curtly told him to stop talking so much. Enraged, the man unleashed 2 powerful blasts of magic, but Cheon calmly pointed a single finger, channeling a beam of blue light that shot all the way to the cliff above. Rocks rained down on the attacker, leaving him barely time to react. Cheon then turned to Nari, asking if she was all right. She wiped away her tears and nodded, saying she was fine. He advised her that when fear struck, she should strike first, demonstrating by pulling out a handful of the man's hair and suggesting she repeat the tactic if she ever encountered danger again. To their surprise, the hair came off in one piece, revealing it was a wig, and the man beneath was completely bald, a clue to a secret yet to be uncovered. Cheon could hardly believe the man had been bald the entire time. The sunlight glinting off his exposed scalp made Nari burst into laughter, and she declared that her fear had vanished completely. More importantly, the situation had created an opportunity for mental resonance, a skill that allowed him and Ku to peer into another person's memories and even share those experiences. Curious, Cheon focused on Nari's memory. Instantly, he found himself inside one of the sinister labs. A cruel doctor grinned as he observed a formless creature undergoing experimentation, noting with twisted satisfaction that it seemed to be developing a sense of self. The doctor filled his hand with mana, pulled the creature closer, and assured it there was nothing to fear, claiming it was simply a durability test. The subject, however, immediately tensed up, dread flooding its body. Returning to the present, Cheon gently patted Nari's head and praised her for her courage. He knew trauma didn't vanish instantly, but he hoped this small step could mark the beginning of healing. He then turned to Ku, now perched atop the bald man's head, and asked what they should do with their captive. Nari, practically buzzing with excitement, insisted she had an idea. Moments later, a rope was tied around a large rock at the edge of the waterfall, with the other end secured around the trembling man's waist. Cheon watched from below and reminded Nari not to judge people by appearances alone. She shot him a mischievous look, and he smiled, optimistic that she might recover faster than he had expected. Cheon stepped down to the river to fill his pot with water, surprising the bird. Nari shouted that his ramen was the best, prompting Cheon to tease her, suggesting perhaps the coconut tribe enjoyed fish ramen too. She confirmed this with gusto. Meanwhile, the defeated arsonist speculated that Cheon must be at least an A-class hunter, or maybe something even stronger. Nari joined Cheon in the water, catching some carnivorous fish with her bare hands and releasing the rest. The man could only marvel at how they could casually cook ramen and tie someone up at the same time. He wondered if these monsters would ruin the broth, but he was even more astonished to see Cheon's pot overflowing with water. Frustrated by their unconventional methods, the man begged them to let him try cooking. Cheon agreed, turning the moment into a sort of impromptu cooking show. The man opened a pack of ramen, treating it like a life-or-death challenge. He carefully added the noodles and soup base, timing everything by counting his own heartbeats. When he reached 200 beats, he lifted the noodles into the air for a quick air shower, believing it would make them perfectly chewy. He imagined adding kimchi for a finishing touch if only they weren't in the demon world. Despite the chaos, the dish turned out beautifully, and all 3 diners stared in awe. They gathered around the table, tasting the ramen with expressions of pure amazement. Minutes later, the bowls were empty, and Ku had begun drifting off to sleep. The bald man politely asked if the meal had pleased them. To his shock, Cheon offered to pay him and asked him to name his price, insisting that such quality deserved reward. The man, scarcely believing his luck, knelt and asked to become Cheon's student. He introduced himself as Nam and explained that he had never encountered anyone stronger than Cheon. Since they seemed likely to stay in the demon realm for a while, he offered to cook other dishes, act as a supply runner, and even pay tuition for lessons. Cheon smiled and called him A-rank, but pressed him to explain why he had attacked Nari. Nari licked the ramen pot as he added that the true reason was personal and complicated, and insisted that as long as he could pass the hunter rank test, nothing else mattered, not rewards and not even Nari's well-being. Cheon, satisfied, told him to stand, noting that after a good meal, a little sparring was only fair, much to Nam's gratitude. Nari, not wanting to be left out, declared she wanted to spar too. Nam laughed, pointing out that it wasn't that he was weak, only that Cheon was exceptionally strong, which irritated Nari. Cheon then pointed to a nearby rock, challenging Nam to break it. Nam protested, explaining that the obsidianite stone was far harder than diamond and would require at least an A-class hunter to shatter. Before he could finish, the stone exploded into fragments from Nari's effortless strike. She grinned and immediately demanded a spar with Nam. Nam had once been a highly promising natural awakener, discovering his powers around the age of 8. This was almost unheard of, as most people didn't awaken until their late teens. His talent, combined with relentless effort, propelled him quickly through the ranks. By the time he was not even 20, he had achieved a B+ rank, earning him brief fame and fueling his dream of becoming the greatest hunter. For a while, it seemed like nothing was missing from his life. But everything changed one day while he was showering. He noticed a troubling development. His hair, once thick and lustrous, was receding. By the time most people his age were just awakening, Nam's hairline had already retreated into a pronounced M shape. By his mid-20s, he was unmistakably balding. He tried every possible treatment, visited countless clinics, and yet nothing could stop it. Once celebrated for his looks and abilities, he began to fade from the spotlight. His growth as a hunter stalled, compounded by a humiliating defeat and disqualification from the A-rank test. One day, while watching television, Nam saw Dr. Han discussing a remarkable discovery. Liquid metal, an incredibly rare material even in the demon realm, had accidentally spilled on an elderly man's head, causing his hair to regrow at the age of 90. At first, Nam found the story absurd and frustrating. He only wanted a cure for his baldness, not a lecture about mechanical beings. When news arrived that a mechanical creature had escaped into the demon realm, Nam jumped at the opportunity, hoping to capture it and somehow restore his hair. Fate, however, had other plans. Instead of success, he found himself defeated by a little girl who had bested him and proudly declared victory. Cheon, observing the scene, joked that Nam would need to do much better if he wanted to earn a promotion to shuttle duty. Cheon then looked at the newly finished, surprisingly sturdy cabinet and appraised Nam. Despite being pummeled all day, the arsonist still radiated energy, ready to challenge Nari again. Flames flickered in his hands, perhaps emboldened by removing his wig. Nari braced herself for the next bout as Nam charged. To his shock, his fiery attack struck something that seemed liquid, snapping back into Nari's form. She countered immediately, delivering a swift kick to his face that sent him flying into a nearby rock. She beamed with pride at her newfound courage. Even after hitting the wall, Nam rose, grinning, insisting he never gave up and demanding another round. His nose soon began to bleed, but he brushed it away. Cheon asked how long he had been in the demon realm. Nam replied it was his 9th day since Friday. Cheon warned him that at his level, exposure to demonic energy could be fatal, and advised him to focus on growth, as his mana core was still developing. Inspired, Nam promised to purify the demonic energy once he returned, and resolved to give everything his all. Later, dressed for travel and ready to enter the gate, he promised to bring back some ramen and exchanged a few last words with Cheon before departing. He even joked about his wig, now replaced by a simple hat, though Cheon denied knowing anything about it. Ku eyed both of them suspiciously, but decided to let it go. As the portal closed, the bird warned that betrayal could be dangerous. Cheon asked for his expert opinion, since Ku could read memories. The bird confirmed that Nam's ambition was genuine, and that, unfortunately, his baldness was real. Cheon considered that Nam might be worth investing in. Nari, for the first time, asked if Cheon could actually understand Ku's words. Cheon confirmed it with a smile. Back inside the small, windowless wooden house, Cheon and Nari remarked on how dark and cramped it felt. Cheon promptly carved a window into the wall. Nari, not wanting to be outdone, cut a window at her own height. Cheon then thought about adding a light source for nighttime. He remembered glowstones, crystals that shone in the dark and could illuminate the ceiling, but they were only found in the dangerous volcanic zones, perilous even for hunters. Ku admitted he came from that very volcanic region, but before he could explain more, Nari eagerly squeezed him between her hands, trying to understand. Cheon explained that Ku was worried about them venturing into the volcanic zone. He insisted he would go alone and told Nari and Ku to stay behind. Nari protested, saying she was no longer afraid of fire. Ku also declared he had unfinished business there. In the end, it was decided they would all go together. Cheon released his golden strings from his fingers to begin crafting gear for the volcanic expedition. In the ominous volcanic zone, a monster peered from the shadows. It was a volcano reptile, its tears silently falling inside the dark, sweltering cavern. The volcanic region was notorious, ranking among the top 3 most dangerous areas in the entire demon world for hunters. The abrasive volcanic ash tore at exposed skin, dense toxic gases and concentrated demonic energy made every breath a potential hazard, and the place was so mysterious that almost nothing about it was known in the human world. Ku made sure to emphasize all of this as Nari, immune to such dangers thanks to her mechanical nature, played in the lava as if it were nothing more than warm water. Ku watched her, marveling at her carefree attitude, and wondered what kind of creature Cheon truly was. Cheon answered without hesitation. He was a chimera hunter. Ku, skeptical, pointed out that real chimera hunters did not look human. Cheon admitted that had once been true of himself too, and then turned the conversation to ask Ku whether he actually enjoyed being around them despite being a monster. Ku confessed that, more than anything, he liked having someone to talk to. Cheon felt a genuine sense of relief. Meanwhile, Nari climbed out of the lava, cheerful as ever, and engaged Ku in conversation. Curiosity then turned to Cheon's origins. The innocent girl guessed, with utmost sincerity, that he must be a native of the demon world like herself, though he was far from it. As they trekked deeper into the volcanic region, Ku explained that the luminous stones they were searching for would most likely be found near lava eruptions, probably right by the crater. Soon after, Nari spotted a vast crater and ran eagerly to its edge, delightfully declaring that she had reached the summit. Chion peered inside, expecting to find the luminous stones, but instead he saw a massive fire toad that appeared to be crying. Nari quickly noticed another one farther ahead. Ku explained that the one with eggs on her back was the female. Only females in breeding season had that distinctive sunken back, and since the female had died, all the eggs would perish. The crater's temperature was far too extreme for them to survive. Nari watched in silence, deeply moved by the sight. Chion told her to wait as he leapt down into the crater, landing quietly behind the giant fire toad, which immediately became aware of his presence. Ku warned that the creature was extremely sensitive, but Cheon pressed on. The fire toad opened its mouth and unleashed a massive stream of fire. Cheon simply advanced, reached out, and touched the beast's head, instantly putting it to sleep. He had carefully applied a measured dose of Nekocobra paralysis toxin, enough to render it unconscious without causing harm. The fire toad would awaken soon. Nari called down anxiously, asking if he was okay. Cheon confirmed that he was fine. He admitted that there was nothing he could do for the eggs that had already been lost, but at least the surviving ones could have a chance. Using his golden strings, he carefully tied the eggs to the male fire toad's back. When the male awoke, it realized what had happened. With a mournful sound, it nuzzled the lifeless female one last time before gathering its strength, leaping high over Nari and Ku, landing gracefully behind them, and locking eyes with the little girl before bounding away into the wild. Cheon, quietly respecting the toad's grief, called the others down to help mine the luminous stones. Nari quickly extracted a stone with her bare hands, feeling proud, while Cheon and Ku added their own to the collection. Ku, exhausted, explained that his fatigue was due to having shrunk. Cheon told him he didn't need to help anymore and should instead tend to his own tasks, joking that he could bring gifts for his friends. The proud bird argued that he had no friends and that the gifts were only parting presents. Cheon reminded him that he was clearly an intelligent creature who missed his kind. Ku admitted he regretted not being able to say goodbye when he had left his group. He recalled his days as a magnificent blazing bird, the joy of discovering the world, but also the drawbacks, like a foolish kin devouring a scorpion he was inspecting. He mused that he might have felt less lonely if he hadn't understood their language. In the end, he left his group and chose solitude, suspecting his kin never noticed his absence. As Ku heaved another stone, it cracked sharply, drawing Nari's attention to a slightly damaged monster egg. None of them could identify the species, so they all stared at it in fascination. Cheon explained that the baby inside would have to break the shell itself to grow strong and healthy. Nari, compassionate as ever, suggested they take the egg with them. Ku was less convinced, worrying that a dangerous monster might hatch, but Cheon assured him there was a safe nesting place nearby. Given the circumstances, they had little choice but to take it. Ku still fretted over Nari's safety, but Cheon smiled and reassured him it would be fine. Once they finished mining, they headed home. Upon returning to the house, Nari cheerfully announced their arrival. Nam, who had already come back, politely asked Cheon to carry his luggage. Cheon obliged, warning him of the weight. Nam, overconfident, struggled, and realized he wasn't as strong as he had imagined. Cheon then noticed a band-aid on Nam's cheek, a small but important detail. Cheon casually asked Nam about the bruises on his face, wondering if he had been in a fight. Nam avoided the question with a forced smile and quickly excused himself, saying he had to prepare for dinner. Later, Cheon transformed one of his fingers into a knife and, working with a luminous stone, explained to Nari that he was crafting a lamp to hang from the ceiling. Nari's eyes lit up with admiration as she exclaimed, "Cheon, you're clever and kind-hearted," comparing him to her father. Cheon smiled warmly and asked if her father was doing well in the coconut tribe. Nari nodded before turning away, embarrassed by the conversation. As the sun dipped lower, Ku lay contentedly on the ground, enjoying the fading light, when suddenly 3 dark creatures appeared, stacked atop each other, their red eyes glinting menacingly. The Mandragoras launched their triple struggle formation ultimate move, and one of them crashed into Ku's stomach. The impact did no damage, but it annoyed him enough to make him rise in self-defense. Neither he nor Nari understood why the creatures had chosen to attack, but before they could react further, Nam arrived with a proud smile, carrying a dish he claimed was always a hit with children: fried tofu pockets. The dish looked surprisingly impressive, even to Ku. Before anyone could start eating, Cheon reminded Nam that he had left a question unanswered. Nam finally confessed after the meal. He explained that he had gone to the Hunter Association to apply for the promotion exam and ran into some A-class troublemakers. Cheon guessed correctly that they mocked Nam for failing 7 times, sparking a scuffle that left him bruised. Nam admitted that the other hunters had pushed him to his breaking point and teased him about his baldness. Cheon, teasing back, insisted that Nam had simply shaved his head, but Nam sighed, lamenting that the real cause of his hair loss remained a medical mystery. Rising to his feet, Cheon asked when the next promotion exam would take place. 60 days, Nam replied. Cheon grinned and declared it was time for special training. Nam's eyes widened with anxious excitement. Cheon outlined the first tasks. Nam would take over dish duty from Nari and clean the leftover glowstones, which were covered in volcanic ash. Nam protested that this hardly seemed like special training, but Cheon reminded him that he was welcome to remain a B-class hunter forever if he preferred. Turning to Nari, Cheon announced they would go fishing to aid digestion, and she eagerly accepted. Nam hesitated briefly, but resigned himself to dish duty, suspecting Cheon had a bigger plan in mind. He bristled at the notion of being some sort of natural-born genius, knowing he had clawed his way to B-class through sheer determination. Without his relentless effort, he would be nothing but a corpse. Determined to prove himself, he followed the others into the forest, silently fortifying his resolve. By the riverside, Cheon and Nari hid their fishing rods while Nari complained that the fish weren't biting. Ironically, the fish were making a meal of Nam, who was washing dishes and clearly terrified. Cheon calmly observed that Nam required constant supervision. He approached the hunter, sprawled on the ground, and scolded him for failing to use his mana shield. Nam explained that he had been practicing but with limited success. Cheon handed him a glowstone and instructed him to hold it. As Nam did, jets of dark energy surged out, making his arms go limp under the force of demonic energy. Cheon explained that some glowstones contained condensed demonic energy. Since demonic energy from the demon realm was raw and unrefined, it had to be purified with controlled mana before a hunter could properly wield their own power. Nam already had plenty of mana stored in his body, but lacked the skill to control it. Under Cheon's guidance, a channel was opened inside him, directing his mana through it. Clenching his fists, Nam felt the surge of energy and managed to hold the glowstone above his head. He grinned and declared that dishwashing and stone cleaning were, after all, part of his special training. Cheon encouraged him to keep going, and Nam, newly invigorated, promised he would polish anything put in his care from now on. As night fell, and the moon cast its gentle glow, the house was softly illuminated by the luminous stone hanging from the ceiling. Everyone drifted off to sleep, Nam snoring, Cheon peacefully slumbering, but Ku, clutching the cracked monster egg, found himself unable to rest. His sharp eyes caught something unexpected. Nari, without a word, had quietly risen and was heading outside in the middle of the night.